workshop class about the listing presentations, and both of those Zoom links have not worked for people. So I'm thinking today, maybe I can send you my list of names, and maybe you could try resending that one link from your email, because for some reason.
Is it still not working?
It's still not working. Yeah, the new
Okay.
one, the refreshed one that you sent me, I forwarded it again to everybody last night, and Wendy said it won't open still on her end. So
it's coming through as a YouTube link, not as a Zoom link. And what's happening is when you click on it, only the first part of the YouTube URL actually flashes. The last 12 characters or so that identify the video don't flash. So it's like it's not completing the link when you click on it, if indeed it's supposed to be a YouTube link, but you're saying Zoom, Will. So I just thought I'd mention that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry. Thanks for clarifying.
Hey, Will, did you
Yes.
send out your proposal?
I did. Yeah, I sent it out. I sent out an email with that proposal attached to it as a template. I kind of modified it, and then I also sent the YouTube link again. But if you didn't get it, if you could just text me your email address or email me again. I thought I got that to everybody.
Okay.
Double check the link today, you guys. I'm not really sure what's going on. Sometimes what I do is I convert the Zoom into YouTube just so it's an easier format. But I will play around with it today and double check it before I send it out. So yeah, our apologies for not having a Zoom link that was working, but yeah.
Hey, and Chris Eden is coming in right now. He didn't get the link. So just Zoom it with us should bring him in, right?
Zoomitwithus.com. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. All right. He should be here in just a minute. Our other star speaker today.
And I have a shout out. This is Jessica Flaw. So my best friend in the Bay Area here where I am is like a marketing guru. And we go online and she says, Portland real estate agents, and boom, there you are. I'm like, Anna's got her SEO going on. I was like, I know her. I'm taking a class with her. She's teaching me.
Oh, that's
Good
so
job.
cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Good job.
Working hard at that SEO, man.
Working for you.
No, Terry.
Or Terry. That's our admin.
That's funny.
All right, so I did record. So we're about 3 minutes past the hour. We're waiting for our next guest. So today we're going to have two really delightful guests. I'm super excited to bring them for you guys this morning. We're just waiting for Chris Eden. He's running a little bit behind, but that's okay because I've invited a bunch of people in, and here he is. Okay, cool.
Yeah, he didn't have the link. It's not Chris's fault.
No worries. Let me just put that up here for a minute.
Hi, Chris.
You there, Chris? His audio is connecting, it looks like. Hold on, I have somebody else texting me that may want to get in here.
It's the real estate commissioner for the state of Oregon.
Yeah, we have one more person trying to get in. She's trying to log on now. So thanks for your patience, everybody. I know we always like to start on time. Thank you again for showing up this morning, because I know it's a holiday for us realtors. We kind of laugh at that because it's we don't work in a traditional environment. We're hustlers.
Hey, Ann, are we recording? I just want to double check.
We are.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, good.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm great. Little technical difficulty. I'm on my phone here, but other than that, pretty good.
Okay, good. Well,
No,
thank
you look good.
Thanks.
So we're going to go ahead and get started, you guys. Again, it's a holiday, so we're going to be a little bit more casual in our conversations today, but we're going to kind of introduce our guests today that kick some butt in this market with buyers. And I know you guys all work with buyers, and there's a lot of butt kickers in this group. So this is, again, an open dialogue. We want you guys to interact. If you guys have, we're going to ask, Will and I compiled some questions we want for conversation. We absolutely want to hear from you guys. We all learn from each other. And sometimes one of us is doing something differently than the other that really gives you that edge, especially in this market as we're working with buyers in a seller's market. And I would say right now, your skills are never more important than in this market. Can you all agree with that? Raise that hand. It's a
Yep.
skills-based market, and some of us are even putting out the best of our skills and watching, how incredibly difficult it is in this market to write and get offers accepted, or even just working with your clients, right? So we're going to talk a lot about the relationship that we're all having with our clients, because so much of this is heavy consultation with our clients out in this environment. And I don't know that we've ever seen such heavy amount of consultations that need to happen ever before and ongoingly, because some of us are carrying buyers for a really long period of time in this market. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started with introducing our guests. So Will, why don't you introduce Chris and I'll introduce Erica.
Okay, so say hello to Chris Eden, everybody. I met Chris quite a few years ago when he was working with another agent in the area, but he has since quit working as a team in that way that he was when we first met, and he's on his own. Chris, has it been about a year and a half or so now since you've gone solo?
Yeah, that's about right. I would little less than that, maybe 16 months, something like that.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, so I met Chris, first when he was on a team, and now he's gone solo. And what I like about Chris is that he's very personable. He's almost deceptively personable, because he's extremely smart about this business, and also in particular about how he does business online, how he presents himself and markets himself digitally, online, but also he's extremely smart about the financials and advising clients on, the value of property and how to strategically win bidding wars. And he's been extremely successful at that in this market. Like in the last 18 months, he's just blowing up his business. So I'm excited to hear what he has to share with all of us.
Sorry, I was just helping somebody get in to our Zoom here who's having a little trouble. So give me just 1 second. Okay, so I wanted to introduce lovely Erica Hag first. Erica and I go way, way back to a world far away from real estate. Erica and I have been team members for about a little over 6 years now, I want to say.
Mhm.
And Erica came on as a buyer's agent right out of the gates and did like 41 buyer transactions in her first little over a year, right under a year, a little over, it's hard to say, but she kicked butt right when she came into the team. And she's been a heavy buyer. She does the listings too now, but she's done a lot of buyers and really is phenomenal at the buyer side of the business. In fact, our lender partner, who's been around for a million years, and he's also very good, he constantly talks about how Erica really knows how to get buyer offers accepted, and she's really direct with her clients. And I always valued not only her work ethic, but her ability just to like get it done. And sometimes even in the diciest situations, she's able to kind of navigate this crazy market we're in and have those direct conversations. And buyers really trust her in this process. They realize like she's gonna get it done. And so much of this job is dealing with the emotional side of the human element as well as the smart side. Erica's not afraid to say, hey, I don't think you should buy this house. Here's why. She's also really good about encouraging her buyers to focus in on the right properties for them and hunting. Like I've never seen anybody be such a phenomenal, like if she knows somebody's looking for something, she's searching everywhere to find this particular house, not just relying on, the buyer to find it or whatever. So Erica's got some great skills. I'm excited for her to share what she's seeing out there, what's working. And so we'll just get right into it. So Will, do you want to take the first question?
Yeah, and before I do, I just want to interject something about the market. I mean, for people like Ann and I that have been doing this for a long time, and even more so than me, but my years in the business are getting up there now too. In the past, I feel like there was a kind of a prevailing attitude in the real estate industry that if you were a newer agent, it was almost easier to start with buyers. In some cases to get on a team, and a team often is running lots of different lead generating systems, and they can feed leads to a buyer's agent, or things like hosting open houses was a tried and true way to meet buyers and pick up buyers that way. That's been kind of a good on ramp for a lot of people historically to get into the business. But Ann and I were talking offline, and we feel now more than ever, working with buyers it requires a higher level of skill than ever before. It's not enough just to have a buyer lead anymore. And so the first question we wanted to start with, which I know comes up with me whenever I work with buyers, and Ann too, is when it's a competitive offer situation, you know that kind of a situation is starting to unfold. How do you advise a buyer on how much to overpay?
Who wants to take that question?
You sound like every buyer I have right now.
Who wants to jump in on that one?
I'll go ahead and jump in. I think, the biggest thing for me is having a really good relationship with the listing agent as we're going through the process. Most of these homes these days have an offer deadline. So starting that relationship early, and then just trying to get as much information as possible from them. How many offers are there? Obviously, you never know what buyer pool you're working with. Do you have the buyer that's lost 20 offers and they're willing to give away their firstborn child? Or, are you working with a relatively young group of buyers who haven't made very many offers? But I generally, try to get as much information to tell me where I need to be. Are we over this benchmark? Are we over this benchmark? Am I getting close? And shockingly, agents are very willing to divulge information right now. So it gives me a very good basis for, because there is no standard, you have to be $50,000 over. And I've seen on the other side, you get a blowout offer that's $60,000 over asking when everything else was around list. So I just do my best to get as much information from the listing agent as possible and kind of balance, where we're at with offers. If we have 2 offers and, they're moderate, okay, maybe we're going $25,000, $30,000 over instead of 50 or 70.
Chris, do you want to share on that question? And I have a question for Erica, but why don't you?
Sure.
Give us your thoughts.
I study bidding wars after the fact. Honestly, I have for a long time. So I'll pay attention to the ones that I lost and actually go and look at what the final sale price was and look at some of the dynamics. I think the biggest thing that people are making mistakes with in this market is a lot of times terms are super crucial to winning. And, people think it's all about price, but it's not. Appraisal waivers are huge right now, appraisal gap coverage, as well as, as is clauses. And so I think writing complete offers is the big thing. Certainly getting the listing agent on the phone, because sometimes, as Erica said, they do divulge more information than they should at times. And, you can use that as a tool. I actually jumped into a bidding war, honestly, 15 minutes ago. And I'm the second offer in, and I'm well over ask, and I'm worried about getting shopped right now. But you just kind of got to play the game and do the best you can.
How do you guys? Those are great answers, you guys. How do you guys handle it when the listing agent won't divulge anything? Because I've had that situation happen where they're just poker faced. Literally, they will not reveal anything.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll jump in. For me, again, it's going back to my buyers and asking them how serious they are about the house. If this is a house that they have to have, then, it's writing all the options to make sure that they are going to be the best all around offer. Chris is right. It's not always about having the highest price. It's about having the most complete, safest option for the seller. And unfortunately, what I tell my buyers a lot of times is you're trying to make it as easy for the seller to say yes to your offer as possible. So you have to have every term. Are you releasing earnest money early? Do you have gap coverage for your appraisal, or can you waive it? Do you have to ask for inspections? Ideally, those should all be, everything, every term possible. Can you waive your seller's property disclosure contingency? Anything to show that you are willing to be in this transaction through thick and thin.
Yeah. Erica, if I could bring something up, you all the time say to me, every term matters. Yes, price is huge, but in a multiple offer situation, for instance, even a week ago, I was representing a listing, and I had 3 phenomenal over list price, but if they don't have appraisal gap coverage and they're going extremely high, and then you have a cash buyer who you're we're not going to worry about an appraisal issue, even though the terms on the financing buyer was super strong, other than they didn't have the appraisal. That appraisal gap can mean the difference between, this and that, the offer coming together at a later point,
Yeah, and you know, it's one of those things where it's like you have to give up or you have to support your purchase price these days. There's just,
Yeah.
I've had it on a listing where, we asked a buyer for appraisal gap coverage and the buyer's agent said they didn't want to give it because they wanted that to basically use the appraisal, and we didn't go with that offer. They were the highest offer. And we didn't feel safe going with them. So I would say that's one of the biggest terms right now is if you don't have it or you can't do it, it really is a strike against you.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about another term that was really prevalent last year. I don't know that I see it as commonly this year, but last year it seemed like there was a lot of people releasing their inspection contingencies. Are you guys still seeing that in this market, or is that something that people aren't doing as much?
I mean, I'll jump in. I personally have never advised a client to release their inspection contingency, but I use as is clauses a lot. I mean, the reality is in the Oregon sale agreement, there's a few lines that address an as is purchase anyways, right? So it's more showing an intention than actually something that's super legally binding. So I use as is clauses a lot, but I don't advise people to waive their inspections entirely.
Okay. I feel like last year we saw a lot of that in different scenarios, not so much, this year, but it sounds like people just don't feel comfortable doing that anymore, per se. Anybody else out there want to make a comment on that they've seen anything or a trend happening?
I don't tend to ever release the contingency. We may shorten it. We may, do as is clauses. I do those a lot, or, no single repair under a certain dollar amount. But I think for the buyer, it has to be a very special property for that to be a suggestion, because I think the buyer needs to have an idea of what they're getting themselves into. We've all seen, a perfectly, relatively new, good shape home have problems. And so I think you're just putting yourself in a little bit of danger with liability on that one.
Okay.
I think there's, oh, go ahead.
I just was in the housing, last year for myself. And as a realtor, I was looking in 2 locations and somebody referred me to a friend of theirs. And he said to me, I said, there's this house we want, it's perfect, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, okay, so you need to be pre-approved. I said, we're pre-approved, blah, blah, blah. We went through all the questionnaire and he goes, okay, you need to offer 50 grand over, no contingencies, no inspection waiver, appraisal waiver. And I said, dude, I'm a realtor. Are you on glue? I would never do that to my clients. 50 grand over, no inspection or inspection waiver and an appraisal waiver. And then I get to the location I'm at. I didn't buy that house, obviously. And total opposite. Crickets. How much over are things going for in your market? Oh, I don't know. I said, you don't know or you don't want to say? And she goes, well, it's up to you. It's your decision. Well, how many offers do they have on the house? And crickets, well, she doesn't have to disclose that. I said, I'm asking you and I'm your client. So you know what I mean? It's just so weird. Each market is so different. The first area I was looking at in a different state, the realtor was like, okay, well, they've got this many offers and they're doing this, that, and the other, blah. Anyways, so
I think
it
depends.
depends. Hear you.
I think also, we can, in Portland, different areas are different, right? There's some areas where it's very common to see 50 to 100 over the list price and really aggressive terms. There's some areas where that's not necessary, and it's kind of knowing, like Chris said, studying the market at hand, and knowing like it's not a bad idea, you guys, if you have buyers at different price points and different locations, go in and look at the last 5 to 10 closings in the last 30 to 60 days. How much over list were people doing? If you have to, call the agents and find out what were some of the terms, because I think sometimes just being able to educate yourself on different locations, especially if you're not actively working those areas, like acreage properties or getting further out, or even or in, I did some comps on, it seems like there was a place in Northeast Portland, and I swear I was every listing that hit the market and sold was 50 to 60,000 over list, almost like clockwork in a particular area. And that area, it was clear that people were going well over the list price to get their offers accepted. Whereas certain parts of Portland, it's like 10,000 was sufficient, 5,000. We're even seeing some areas that's like just full price is sufficient, so it's just like studying that location and knowing like, okay, what's the common theme that's going on in that particular area. And of course, condition plays a role in location, right? Like if something's an absolute cream puff and you don't have to do any work to it, people are going to be a lot more aggressive on price and terms than if something might be not quite as, move-in ready.
I always, so in my consultation, I try to lay out the worst case scenario of everything that you're going to have to do. But then, you go back to it's case by case, because there is no like, it's a standard $50,000 over, maybe more, because you may have some homes that have been sitting for a while, and then, you get 2 or 3 offers maybe, or you may be able to slip in as the only offer. And so, but you want to always have them prepared for what they might have to do. I guess is my thought with it.
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know Wendy Atkinson, she's on the Zoom call with us. Wendy's one of the most seasoned principal brokers in the state of Oregon, probably the nation. So I'm gonna check myself with Wendy on what I'm about to say, but my understanding has been that a listing agent can actually divulge the price of any offer if they have permission from their seller. Like, we don't always have to play this game of kind of kabuki theater where, everybody is being vague and not direct, but they have to have the permission to do that. And not all listing agents will do that, but sometimes they will. Sometimes they'll be, they've been authorized to be totally candid if you ask.
Yeah, you're right. Well, it's fine if you get permission. It can backfire though, sometimes
Yep.
Then agents start getting upset because offers are being divulged, and then their buyers will back out. So it can go either way, but you're absolutely right.
So you guys, we've talked about, and we've already touched on some bullet points around this question of how do you make your offer stand out? But I know there are some people on this call that are newer to the business. So can we kind of drill down on that and actually like talk sort of specifically about some more of the bullet points, like actual, bullet points for a successful strategy to win a bidding war?
I'm happy to jump in here.
Yeah.
So in terms of I think there's a couple of things that are really underrated that people don't pay enough attention to, are how an offer is actually presented on paper. So like, I'll write it in a very specific way where, you can't say too much now regarding a bunch of things, obviously based on, fair housing, but you can still kind of paint a story of why somebody wants to purchase a property and maybe how they can qualify to pay the mortgage, that type of thing. And so I typically will kind of paint a picture where I'll spend a lot of time writing a nice introduction. I'll hit the bullet points of the offer, and then I'll actually talk about the lender, and I'll offer the lender's experience level, and I'll offer their number to the listing agent in the presentation. And I've only seen that done by maybe a couple other agents in the last year, both of whose offer we accepted on the listing side. But I think that's something that's definitely underrated is how you present offers and how much care you take to do that.
It's a great point.
I like to make sure that all of the terms are bullet pointed when I send it over, just because it's easier for them to look through and see kind of where the offer's sitting. Again, I always think about how easy can I make it for the listing side to say yes to our offer. That should be like, it's kind of the driving force behind crafting the offer, is how easy can you make it for them to say yes. Both in all the terms and letting them read through the offer, being very specific with things. There's nothing more annoying than having, open-ended terms that just kind of pop up like, oh, we'll go $2,000 above any other offer. Well, up to what, like be very specific in terms of what we're actually doing, and just so that there's no questions. Again, I like to get on the phone with them and let them know that I've sent something over, that, I have a great working relationship with my lender. He does all my loans. So that they know that there's a high level of trust there.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I could jump in here on as a listing agent is oftentimes buyer's agent will buyer's agents will ask, can we do an escalation clause? And while they're effective, they're also where you can kind of get yourself in trouble too. Like I had a multiple offer situation about a week ago where two people came in with really healthy escalation clauses, very similar. And what's happened where you get more than one escalation clause is the math doesn't really work. And so oftentimes that's where you kind of show the buyers have kind of shown their cards. And so you go to potentially one of those offers that might be looking like the strongest or some term that looks the most enticing for the seller, and you start negotiating the price versus letting it be used. So be really careful with escalation clauses. I know a lot of people don't use them or don't, recommend them on listings, highest and best, but it's just it's kind of a buyer beware. Make sure you consult with your buyers about the best case scenario and the worst case scenario, because it can kind of work against the buyer as well. And when you said, what's the math not work out? Well, let's put it this way. Last year I had a listing that had 23 offers on it and 5 escalation clauses. And when I say the math doesn't work, is about 2 or 3 of those escalation clauses had no cap, meaning they would pay 5 or 10,000 over the highest best offer with no cap. And so when you start running the math on all these offers, they don't add up. You can't say, oh, well, this offer is the highest, now we'll add 10,000. You actually have to just at that point decide who has the strongest terms and price and financing, and then decide who you're going to work with. Or you go back to everybody and say, get rid of your escalation clauses, just write your highest and best offer. So it can be really challenging to deal with escalation clauses in multiple offer situations. I try to steer clear of them. I know that they're effective at times, but in offer situations like we're dealing with, a lot of times it gets really, really messy.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, please.
Please do.
So I typically don't use them. They definitely can get messy. I mean, if you're looking at everything from a psychological standpoint, trying to evaluate, buyers' motivation level, sometimes it can get kind of gray because, if somebody offers you a clean offer, let's say you're listed at 450 and somebody offers you a clean offer at 480 with really good terms, and then somebody gives you an escalation up to 490, you can go with the escalation, but it only really means they're willing to pay 490 if somebody else is. And, that can sometimes count against you. Another thing is it can get messy. I remember reading a story, I think by Brian Belair's on Masters of Real Estate last year, where they got 2 offers that had 80,000 escalation clauses that were competing, and they accepted and pushed to the highest price. And it was like a big, debate whether that was legal or not. So certainly I think just writing, highest and best and the cleanest offer you can is a better idea in most of these situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Well, let's talk about buyer consultations. I know that we're really big on buyer consultations on our team. We always have been. We've always tried to get in front of what the buyer is about to face, whatever market it is, and also kind of share how things are going to go. What has changed in terms of, consultation? And everybody can be a little different. Maybe you're just having a phone conversation before you get out the door. Maybe you're sitting with them and saying, get ready to rumble. What are the conversations going on right now? And as you guys are going through this process with your buyers, what's different? What are you talking about? What are you seeing out there?
Erica's chuckle is so telling.
Well, I think it's become a harder conversation because, on our team, we've established there are some buyers that we don't work with just simply for the fact that it's going to be really difficult to get them into a home. If they're low down and, at a very difficult price point, you have to weigh your options as a buyer's agent. How much running around are you going to do with them? How much time are you going to lose if you actually get them into a home? Is that going to have been worth your time, or would it have been smarter to go and work with a slightly more qualified buyer? The other thing is buyer motivation. Are they just kind of in the game? If the right house pops up, or do they need to move? Are they willing to do all the things that they're going to have to do to write a successful offer? I look at it as if my buyer's not willing to write above asking and, they don't want to do appraisal gap coverage. I know that I've literally just set myself up to write a lot of offers that aren't going to get accepted. And so it's determining their motivation. What's their driving force? you know, what's their timeline? If they're like, well, I've got time and I don't want to do these things, well, that's cool, but time doesn't help you right now. And so it's really actually, it's a two-way interview at this point. You know, it's very much deciding, do I want to work with this person based off of what they're telling me? Or do I think that my time's gonna be better served working with somebody who's a little bit more motivated to get the job done? So it's really kind of, I think, having the difficult conversation, like how much are they putting down? Do they have appraisal gap coverage? Or do they need to buy? Or do they just maybe want to buy if it's right? There's a lot more, you know, figuring out, getting them, you know, obviously pre-approved right away, but you know, how comfortable is that pre-approval? So yeah, we've had a lot of buyers who haven't been able to kind of make the muster. You know, they have 0 down or they have like 3% down and they're up to 400. And in the Portland market, that's just not going anywhere. Especially if they're, you know, so many buyers, I feel like right now don't want to do a townhouse or a condo and they only want the single family home. So to me, it doesn't make sense to use my time for that buyer. I'll wait and go work with another buyer who's motivated.
Yep.
I'll jump in. So I do sometimes take harder assignments. Like I do sometimes help first-time home buyers with, you know, 5% down. I think the biggest thing about that is talking to them about a very clear-cut strategy at the beginning that you're not going to be going through open houses and winning bidding wars. You don't even have a shot, and knowing which you know, fights you can pick and which fights you can't. And so typically I'll show houses at night on weekdays to buyers like that. And, you know, you'll have to wait till the environment's, you know, cool enough to be able to convert at times. You know, I've helped a lot of 5% first time home buyers, but, you know, they have to be motivated. And I think a couple of weeks ago, I won a bidding war with one where we just, we were able to get some appraisal gap coverage because the dad was co-signing and we ended up winning. But yeah, it's really hard to win with them, obviously. I mean, I think certainly looking at how motivated somebody is and how long they've been looking is a big red flag for me. Because typically I only work with buyers for like a month or 2 months maximum. I was actually looking at my numbers last night and about 63% of the offers I write are accepted. And I write on average about 1.6 offers per buyer. So, you know, either they're on it and they're going to listen to me and trust me and, you know, agree with the terms that I'm presenting, or they're not. And kind of have to cut bait sometimes. Like I've had very, very well qualified buyers who aren't there psychologically. Yeah. And frankly, I'm dealing with one right now because I think I've put 5 buyers into contract in the last 5 weeks and won, I think, 4 bidding wars. But, you know, it's something where if they're not there psychologically, if they're not motivated, if they're not going to listen to you, even if they have all cash, it's a problem. So
let's talk about that. Let's dive a little deeper into that, because I think that is something that we're not, you know, it's so much of where there's a will, there's a way in this market, right? Because Chris, you just talked about how you've helped a lot of buyers with lower down payments, which in a lot of cases is almost seemingly impossible. And I know last year we had buyers who entered the market like this time of last year and they just got buyer fatigue and they left the market. And a few of them came back and we helped them in the fall when things were cooler. Like sometimes it is all about market timing and saying, hey, right now it's just a fever pitch and the competition is just too fierce. Whereas other times you can, you know, sort of coach them into, like, if they're really listening to you and emotionally understanding. So I know Erica and I have those conversations all the time. It's like that emotional ability to understand exactly what's happening in this market and to really trust the agent they're working with, and to understand, like, when we tell them you may have to write it this particular way, which feels uncomfortable to talk about, but we know this is how they're going to win it. So why don't you guys talk about the emotional side of it? Because you're right, at any price point, cash or financing, 1 million to 2 million, like we're seeing at all price points, like that emotional, like, green button is really huge.
Well, and let me just interject, because I want to hear Chris and Erica's thoughts on that. But I just want to interject, even if it's kind of stating the obvious. I think sometimes we want to help buyers so much. All of us are, you know, we're service oriented. We have a heart for our buyers. We want them to win. I think sometimes it can be challenging to tell them the truth about the fact that that they're probably going to have to overpay in this market, and maybe by a lot. And I find that there are some people who they're just not in that mindset yet, even though maybe they've been pre-approved, maybe they've been looking, to just really be straight with them about how much they may have to overpay and find out, are they really willing and able to accept that? I think is so critical on the front end. But yeah, now you guys go. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about what Ann just said.
Well, here, I'll address it first, if that's okay. So I think the biggest thing is creating trust between you and your client, right? Because they have to believe you. They have to understand what's going on in the dynamics of the market. So yeah, I write really detailed market reports, and that attracts a certain type of clients. A lot of my clients are in like tech or engineers or doctors or that type of thing. But ultimately, you have to build trust one way or the other. Like another way that, you know, my mentor, Mark Hansen, used to do it, I think all the way back to how Steve Kerr did it, was the triangle of trust. You find somebody who, you know, that you both know, and then they can vouch for you that you know what you're talking about, but they have to believe that you know what you're talking about. The other aspect is, what's the incentive to buy now? Because let's say prices have gone up 5% in the last 2 months, less than 2 months into the new year, which what I told buyers yesterday at a first buyer consultation. It looks like probably, I'm guessing, prices are going to go up another 10% in 3 months. And I was talking to, you know, some pretty analytical buyers, and I was explaining the opportunity cost aspect. You know, like if you guys don't get pre-approved quickly and you wait a month, maybe the property you want to buy costs 2 to 3% more, and maybe your mortgage rate is 0.25% higher. What's the interest expense on that? Oh, well, it was about $20,000 over 30 years. And on the purchase price, it was 10 to 15 grand. So it's really straightforward, you know, like, are you going to go and do this quickly, or are you not? And just understanding the financial implications of that.
Well, and that's really awesome, Chris. That's fantastic advice. I'm curious, with that kind of client, how do you answer when they say, well, maybe we'll just wait till next year? I mean, I understand the opportunity cost, but I guess more specifically, what do you say when they say, we'll just wait for the market to cool off? Like, this can't continue forever.
Well, you know, I used to kind of be a little bit skeptical. I remember that in September of 2020, I got into a debate with Mark about, you know, what was going to happen with the market. I was thinking it was going to cool off a bit, and he was thinking not. I mean, it's been so tight. And if you look at it domestically, we're probably short about 5 million houses right now. They can only build about 1.7 to 2 million houses a year. And so, you know, unless a lot of baby boomers decide that they want to completely sell out of this market, which doesn't seem to be happening, you know, we're going to be short on supply probably for 3 to 5 years minimum. And, you know, prices are going to go for a run. I just bought a second property, and I tell them that, you know, like, I have a lot of skin in the game now. You know, I bought a larger house in December, so I have a lot of exposure. And, you know, so my money's where my mouth is, essentially.
I heard something this weekend. I was listening to some economists talk about the market, but he's like, it doesn't matter what's going to happen with the market. If you can afford the payment and that's the house you want to live in, buy the flipping house. Don't worry about timing the market. Nobody in history has been able to perfectly time the market. Yeah, you might have bought, but you had no idea what was going to happen next, in truth. And the reality is none of us really know what's going to happen in the future. We can speculate, we can analyze. We all have a pretty good idea the market's probably not going to go down here in Portland, at least. But at the end of the day, it's like, can you afford it? And do you like the house? And that's really the just basic questions for a buyer, instead of trying to, you know, perfectly time or get a better interest rate or lower interest rate, or they're going to pay more interest rate and then get a lower house price. I mean, you could drive yourself absolutely crazy trying to make that perfect little scenario for yourself work out. And it's just, if you need to buy a house, you want to buy a house, and it makes sense for you payment wise, buy a house. But just be really like strategic when work with somebody you feel like you can trust to guide you through this market in whatever price point location you're looking in. Because at the end of the day, most people we've sold houses to rarely ever, I don't know one client in the last, you know, decade that's regretted buying a house. Everybody I know has bought a house and built equity and enjoyed their living situation. And, you know, I mean, it's usually never like, oh my God, I hated living in this house and I hate that I built equity. Actually, you guys, the other thing too is like, did anybody go to Noah Blanton's economic forecast last week that WFG held? Raise your hand. holy crap. I don't know if they recorded it, but it was phenomenal. I really like the way he explains the breakdown. But he basically said here in Portland, we are not going down. We are way behind in housing. He actually said the renters are going to feel the squeeze very big because rents are going to continually to rise at an exponential rate here in Portland as much as they can based on the laws. But he just said, you know, Portland is, despite all the challenges we've had, we have a booming area where people are still buying and moving into. So, you know, if they're renting or if they're like, you know, trying to wait for perfect market conditions, it could get worse for a lot of people, you know?
Well, and the other, excuse me, the other thing with that too is when you look at the average price of homes up and down the West Coast, I mean, really from Vancouver, BC to San Diego, Portland still is by far one of the most affordable small urban metro areas. And I think that's just one of so many factors that are converging right now in our market. And I think will continue to drive the market and keep the market here very strong for quite a long time.
So funny you said that, Will, because actually I'm writing my next monthly update and I literally just priced out all the major markets.
Yeah.
From Vancouver, BC, all the way to San Diego.
What'd
I
you
just did
find?
that.
What'd you find?
What I find?
I've done
Okay.
it.
So Vancouver, BC is at 1.4, I think, on median house price or average house price. Seattle's at just over 900. San Diego's just over 900. LA's just knocking on 1 million, and the Bay Area, I think, was at 1.5.
Yep.
So yeah, as a major West Coast market, we are ridiculously cheap.
What was the Portland market that you saw? What number was that at?
The last number I saw was 589,700, I think, off the top of my head.
That's incredible
So-
when you think about the entire West Coast being a million or over, and we're at like, makes us feel like a deal, even though we know it's not.
Yeah, I actually happen to have that up on my screen right now, the MLS Market Report. Let's see, median sale price has increased to 512 at the moment, but it's bounced around.
What was the average price though? I think the average price in PMAR or something was higher than that.
Yeah, it seems like it's bounced around. I try to follow it carefully between about 512 and 540 something, and kind of in that range.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, just show a buyer that and they'll be like, oh, we're a smoking deal.
Well, yeah, and then when you get into larger properties, which I know some of us deal with, like acreage properties especially, you know, in comparison to other places on the West Coast, it can look really compelling for some buyers.
Yeah.
So what about luxury? Are you guys seeing any changes with luxury, like luxury buyers, luxury price points? Like, is the market, how different is the market, let's say at 1 million and above?
You know, honestly, I haven't been operating up there that much, so I'll let Erica take it.
Well, you know, I've got some buyers who are, especially like in some of the like Oswego and stuff like that. And it's still, I mean, things are moving and things that you wouldn't expect. I mean, there was a half-built house the other day that was a flip, and you know, my buyers were like, that's not going to go. And I'm like, it's going to go. And you know, it's, the thing is, you know, and I'm an equestrian, so I watch the equestrian properties, and those have never been hotter. They've never sold faster or for more money. And it doesn't matter. Like there have been a couple in the last year that had sat previously for multiple years, and they are selling with multiple offers now. It's just, you know, whether they're staying in equestrian properties, but when you have these large chunks of land, I think people are realizing it's a safe place to put your money if you're sitting on it for a while. And, you know, especially with building prices going up, they're moving. I think there's a large push to put money, if you have the excess, into real estate right now. So it's still multiple offers. It's still pulling out all the stops. You know, and even if it's just space, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of things that still need updating that are reasonably priced and like, you know, but they're still, if they've got the space and they're in the right location, it all goes.
I will say this, I'm working with a lot of high net worth people, but a lot of them are actually buying multiple properties rather than buying that really expensive house. Cause I think maybe they see a benefit to having, you know, a separate location, a vacation home on the coast, maybe going to buy a duplex somewhere. That's the bidding where I'm in this morning. You know, just things that can generate an income or that, you know, have some diversification over their existing holdings, and not all their net worth is tied up in real estate.
I try not to work with too many buyers right now, just out of necessity. I try to stay focused more on the listing side, but I do have a handful of buyers right now that are very active in the $1.5 million to $5 million range. And I noticed that, inventory is thin, just like the rest of the market. Inventory is thin for luxury homes all over the Portland metro area. And a lot of the same, strategic kind of points that we've talked about apply. Couple of things that I notice are different is, the relationship with that other agent really comes into play, the listing agent, because they're really kind of the watchdog for their clients. They don't want to waste their clients' time. Their clients are high net worth people. I've had 2 situations in the last 2 weeks where with 2 different listing agents, I was with my client and we just sat in the family room and, with my client's permission, I said, look, here's where we are. We don't want to waste time, sending offers back and forth and hiding behind email. This is our position. And we just talked it through. We said, if we were to make an offer, we would come in at this price. And then we talked about it. We'll have all the inspections scheduled. We'll cap repairs. We won't ask for any single repair, less than $5,000. We'll waive the seller's property disclosure contingency. One of these is a cash offer. The other is a lender. So we talked about, the financing in both cases. But basically, we just went down the list and said, this is how we'll handle the transactions. In one case, I had proactively set up all the inspections. I also told them who the inspectors were. They knew those inspectors. That was a factor. And so, it's a little bit of a different conversation, but the same process, the same mechanics. But I find that in many cases, that relationship with the agent back and forth, the 2 agents, becomes much more personal rather than just sending emails kind of, with offers attached to them. And in one case, we asked if we could present the offer by Zoom. Like, can I present the offer with the listing agent present and the sellers by Zoom? So we're all having a conversation, and they were open to it. So it's a lot of the same dynamics, but I just like I think Chris said earlier, I try to make the offer as easy for them to accept as possible. And often they have, high net worth people, they often have timing issues that they're dealing with, really complex timing issues. In one case, my buyer, the guy who's shopping up to about $5 million, he has issues onshoring money from China, but he does have money in the US. So there's other factors that come into play. In that case, I got him introduced to somebody that is an executive within a high net worth specialized banking division of US Bank. And so, they have the ability to help a buyer like that, where like a typical lender cannot. And so, some of those factors come into play. Also, the homes they're harder to find. I mean, I'm looking for withdrawn listings. I'm looking for canceled listings. I'm networking through people in the community, to find some of these homes. So,
by the way, I've also seen a lot of agents that I know of, they're actually doing a lot of proactive things to find inventory. So can we talk about that for a minute? Like one of my, he's not on here today, but he said he was going through, just like what you said, Will, expired and withdrawn listings. He actually just wrote an offer on a withdrawn listing. And he called the listing agent and said, hey, is that seller still interested in seeing an offer? And she said, yes. And you never know what the circumstances are. Maybe they pulled it off the market to do some repair work or get through the holidays, or they're waiting for March 1st or whatever it is. So let's talk about that. Like right in this low inventory, where inventory like is super, super tight and your buyers are searching for something maybe specific or in a certain location. What are you guys doing to see like how to find that inventory?
I showed one yesterday, literally a withdrawn listing in Dunthorpe. I don't know why I didn't think to search that category sooner, but I did. And there was one that might be perfect for my client. So anyway, I'm curious to hear from others.
Personally, I set up searches for the MLS that are really detailed, and I have them come to me, and I have the emails in caps, so I know what's coming in, and I just screen them. And it's actually how I found a property on the coast on the day it was listed, just within like an hour of it going on the market last week. And we put in an offer within, I think, 7 hours of it being on the market, got the offer accepted 48 hours later. So just being really fast. And you can plug in lots of detailed stuff into the MLS and, just have it come to you. Don't have your clients spammed, but you can make it so you instantly get an email, and then, first, before Zillow does even. So that's impressive to clients too, I think, when you're like, hey, it's not on Zillow yet, it's on Redfin. Have a look.
Hey, Chris, somebody in the sidebar is asking, Chris, can you explain that a little? Jessica,
Okay.
I'm not sure.
No, that's me.
I'm not sure about, can you
Yeah, so
clarify?
Chris, so you were just saying, you set up the MLS to just, blast you everything that you've marked that comes in.
Yeah.
And I assume that's just, I'm a new agent, so I'm not on that yet. I haven't set up all the RMLS or anything, but there's just a bunch of things that you can press and it'll just automatically.
Yeah. I think traditionally it's meant to be sent to the buyer directly, but I find they get spammed and they're not as attentive as you are. And so you can go into prospecting, and then you can plug in a lot of detail, more detail than people can search themselves individually online through realtor.com or Zillow or Redfin. And then, first. And so if somebody needs a primary on the main and they need to be in a certain particular area at a certain price point, you can look at lot size, bathrooms, you can look at tons and tons of stuff on there and just kind of individually plug it in. You can look for, townhomes with no HOA. You can look for really, really specific stuff if you need to.
Great to know. Thank you.
I do it a little bit differently than that because I always feel like a lot of times there's the core concepts that they have to have. Say it's a master on the main. And then let's be honest, a lot of the other terms are negotiable. So I set it up very broad. I do a lot of times have them sent to myself and then I screen them. And if it looks like it's a good fit, but so often if we set up something like a 10,000 square foot lot and you find something at 9,995, it's gonna, and everything else works. I want to see that. And so I set up very broad searches. I do have them sent to myself so that I'm screening them first and not just bombarding my buyers with a lot of emails. The other thing I do, and you can hate me for this, but Redfin actually has a far better notification system. RMLS does not send out notifications as soon as those properties are listed. And I've had this happen to me time and time again where sometimes my buyers are like, it's been on for 8 minutes and my email from RMLS doesn't go out, even though I have them set up multiple times a day. They only go out at certain times. It is not the fastest option for me.
Erica, we don't feel that you're working hard enough for us. This has been on the market for 8 minutes.
I have buyers send them to me all the time. 8 minutes on it, I'm like, what do you do? But
yeah.
I do actually look through Redfin a lot, just because it's easy and I can be like, okay, well, this, these meet my search criteria. And it does get them, it pops up on notifications from Redfin faster, but I'll send it out to my buyers. And it's just, you kind of have to be on the hunt. You have to be looking for those homes that are 90% of what your buyer is looking for and sending them out because let's be honest, there's rarely a 100% match that your buyer is like, oh, it checks all the boxes and it's priced exactly where I want it. It just doesn't happen. And so, it's, if you can show them, this is a really solid option, it's 95% of what you want, then they're like, okay, great. And it just keeps you top of mind. I have the automatic searches, some of them set up to go directly to the buyer, but I do find it's better if I screen them and then send them or just send them directly.
Erica, you're really good about broadening the search in your own way where you're trying to show and introduce them to options that check a lot of boxes, but it may not always quite be in the exact location and it's always, and that's so much a part of helping people understand that you may have to consider this, even though it's not 100%, it's 82% of what you're looking for. And you've put a lot of deals together by just telling somebody, look, this is not the school district you want, but it's got everything else.
I'm a big one on heavy consultation in terms, and what you find out is what's really important to them at the end of the day. So if school district's the only thing, then great, you might have to concede on the house a little bit. Yeah. Or if the house is more important, then great, maybe you concede on other areas. But I think so often sometimes buyers just need to have a broader scope. And I'm the first to tell my buyers, going back to establishing a trust that I'm going to tell you not to buy a house well before I'll ever tell you to buy a house. Just simply because like, I want that relationship after the fact. And so, you know, I want to feel good about the home that they're purchasing as well. If I'm scared to go into the home inspection, I don't think it's super good thing. And so I'm very candid with them. You know, I tell them all the things. I'm like, okay, I think it needs a roof, or like, let's look at this, you know, like aspect of the home, because, you know, buyers are looking at it and they're like placing furniture. They're not looking at systems or the structure or those type of things. And so, you know, I want to be very open and candid. And I think that builds a trust that they're willing to look at things when I say, hey, this might not be everything that you want, but it's 90%. So like, let's take a look at it and see if it works for you.
Hey, I know we're getting close to the hour, and I know one of the things that Will and I chatted about briefly that we thought we could bring up, because it's starting to become a thing, and that is you can no longer say that you are a free service to buyers. We're starting to see downward pressure on a lot of commissions on the buyer side. And we're not here to tell you that commissions are one way or the other. We're not breaking that law. But what we want to talk about is, as the market gets squeezed, we start to see this kind of downward trend on buyer agent commissions. And are we starting to have those conversations with our buyer about, hey, there's a minimum standard to a commission that we work for? Because in some cases, there's not any commission. Like there's some new construction where they're offering $1. And there are some listings out there that, you know, you're going to be showing where if you're not prepared to have that conversation with your buyer, maybe up front, it's going to be a little more challenging as you go through this process. So can we maybe take the last few minutes and talk about that? Or you guys, is that something we can get into?
That's a bit of a sticky one, honestly. It's hard to know what to do in those kind of situations. Like I've seen, you know, listings, for instance, down in McMinnville. I think new construction down there hardly offers any compensation. Typically, I'm not looking at it, and I'm just trying to find the best property for the buyer, and usually it works out. I did have a situation where I walked a buyer into Taylor Morrison about a month ago,
Yep.
and 1%, I got paid. I did like 5 new construction deals in the last, like prior to that, in the last like 2 years. And I got paid on average between 2.5 and 2.7. So I was getting paid more most of the time. But yeah, you know, but ultimately it's what's right for the buyer, because that's a great buyer. You know, she's really well qualified out of the Bay Area, could go buy 4 other properties if she really wanted to. So she has a good experience, then, you know, she could go buy more. And so at the end of the day, it's about helping people, not being so focused on compensation. At least that's what I'm trying to do, because I'm trying to grow. So if I can grow how many transactions I do, how many people I help, it just kind of snowballs.
Yeah, I think, you know, to some degree, it's becoming a little bit of a case by case. And we've talked about this, but it's, you know, some new construction is down dramatically. I've seen it up here in the Portland Metro as well, where you're getting, you know, 1, maybe up to 2, depending on the builder. I've seen some that are less than 1%. And then there's some homes that aren't offering any buyer's agent commission. And, you know, we've started talking about the process of like, well, what does that look like? What's the minimum that will work for? Because we do, you know, we are a value to our clients. And so, you know, it's unfortunately certain numbers are becoming more prevalent. But, you know, if you're paying a commission or like a referral fee off of your commission, like they're going to want to get paid too. So there's a balance to that, and having conversations with your clients about like, what does that look like if there isn't a commission being offered, then, you know, we have to come to some sort of agreement. So
let me give some feedback that, you know, again, we're not here to say what you guys should work for. That's your own personal business decision. I know a realtor right now who has 3 deals in escrow she's not getting paid anything on because of the circumstances. And I'm horrified by that, because I believe we all are a value and we should not work for free. But again, everybody has their own business. You guys are independent contractors. You can make your own decisions. So we're not here to tell you what to work for. But back in the recession, when there were, so we're in the opposite market of a recession right now. We have maybe 1 to 3 houses that might pop up to show a client, right? Which is great, because you only have 1 to 3 houses to open a door for. Back in the recession, there were 40 to 60 in a similar price point. So there were a glut of inventory, and the price points were, candidly, they were 150,000, 200,000. You'd be writing an offer on a short sale and wait 8 months to get paid if you even got paid. So one of the things that we did back, or I did back in the recession, because I was getting a lot of buyers under that $200,000 price point, which I know seems alarming because it's like, wow, I can't believe those price points existed. Yep, they sure did. You'd be running around all day, every day, weekend, showing house, writing offers, waiting 8 months. The offer didn't come together because the short sale bank said no. And you're literally spending a year with a client writing multiple offers, not getting things accepted. So I did come up with a strategy where I told my buyers, if you're within this price point, there's a minimum commission that I require. And I would put in the buyer broker agreement that it would have to be whatever the MLS was agreeing to pay me plus an additional X. And in that many cases, it was $4,000 in addition to what was in the MLS. And you can bring a cashier's check to closing for my fee, or we can write it into the sales. We can write it in as closing costs, and then the lender doesn't touch that. I did that all day long, and buyers were happy to pay it because they couldn't get realtors to work for them. There were literally realtors that would just never work with buyers in certain areas or price points because they just weren't getting paid enough, and there was just too much, like work and not any payment for that. So you guys have to start thinking about this, because I'm going to be really frank with you. The conversations at some of the higher levels are, we could get to a point where it's prevalent and common to see little to no buyer agent commissions. And I don't know about you, but I'm not working for free. I personally believe in getting paid, and I'm okay to set forth, hey, buyer, let's have this conversation. If we run into something, we're going to have this conversation again. It may not be an issue. It may not be something we ever have to deal with. But if we get to a certain point, this is how we can structure the deal. And you can let them know, here are your options up front. And if we get to that point, we're going to have that conversation again, because I want everyone here to be in a position where they feel like you have value to your clients. Now, if you choose to take the commission at whatever it is, that's totally your prerogative. I don't have a problem with that. But I'd hate to see you guys start taking on clients where maybe there's a few transactions you're not going to get paid on, and maybe you're trying to decipher, like, do I want to work with that client, or how do I get paid, right? Like, at the end of the day, nobody out here that's working in any industry is just completely working for free just because, we're trying to do the right thing. So start having those conversations, because it's possible they could become more prevalent as the market tightens a little bit more as we get through the year. And it's okay to have those conversations, I guess is what I'm saying.
You know what? I mean, Tom Ferry is a very visible guy in the real estate industry. He's talking about this a lot right now in his podcast and things. I mean, he's talking about like it's just inevitable that this is where the industry is going. It's elsewhere in the trade press if you guys follow Inman News or other news. But early on, I think in our very first class that we did like this, a workshop, we talked about knowing your wage. And I think as a buyer's agent, I think we have to be convinced of our own value to the client in order to convey that. Because in the past, it's been easy to work with buyers because we could say, hey, my service is free. Well, it's not really. And like when I hear Chris talk, or I listen to Erica talk, it's clear that, you've mastered this process and your service has value. Like it has genuine value in the same way that an attorney's service has value, or a great CPA.
Well, let me also say that I'm starting to see a trend where some realtors are telling their buyers at a buyer consultation to be more competitive. If you have the financial means to pay my commission, we can go in on offers and remove the buyer agent commission, and you're paying me. You will start to see that trend happen more and more as, buyers are trying to be more competitive, and they're realizing, okay, I'm going to pay one way or the other. It might just be another way to, structure it. Everything's on the table right now, you guys, everything.
Yeah.
I know we never thought about it before. It's like, it almost seems crazy to talk about it, but he's right. Tom Ferry and a lot of other industry people are talking more and more about the possibility of, buyer agent commission starting to become, like that it's becoming, in some parts of the country, it's becoming normalized that the buyers are paying for the buyer's agent commission.
And it wasn't always guaranteed that the other agent would co-op, like what we've all come to expect as normal. Co-op meaning they cooperate and share part of the commission that was agreed to when they took the listing. That was not always standard practice.
Yeah.
I wasn't in the business, that long ago, but I've talked to a lot of old timers who were, and so we may be swinging back to a model like that, but plenty of people did well in that model too. I think we just have to adjust.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say that I've written BAC into an offer before, and if you saw something like a Rex house, you can go and do that. I think I had actually somebody respond to me on social media about that when I made a comment a while back who worked in that company high up, and you can do that. So like you can, and ultimately, I think the pressure on buyer's agent commission is coming from where the market dynamics are, so much power being on the seller side. As we kind of see maybe more the market balance out over time, as more homes are built domestically, and maybe inventory starts to go back up in the next few years, maybe some of those pressures will wane. I mean, they're always saying, oh, they're going to undo agents and we're all going to be replaced by computers and stuff. But I mean, I think if you offer value, as Will said, some kind of unique perspective to be able to help people see value, they'll come back to you. They won't want to just call Zillow, they'll call you, even if you met them through Zillow. And I've met a ton of buyers through Zillow who call me, not Zillow. So just a thought.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, even as a listing agent, I walked away from a listing last week, a $900,000 listing, where it came out in the discussions with the sellers that their expectation was that they would pay no more than 3.5% for the listing. So that means, what are you going to offer for the broker agent commission on a 3.5% listing? You're going to offer 2.25, which is more common. Now that used to be only at the luxury end of the market that I was seeing 2.25 rather than 2.5 or even 3% being offered to the buyer's agent. Now I'm starting to see 2 to 2.25 is a lot more common, and even lower than that, which some of you guys have mentioned. But what do you do in a situation where somebody with a $900,000 house says we'll pay 3.5% total? I walked away from it because I just don't want to be in that situation. I don't want to work for 1%. I know what I'm going to spend to market that house, on photography and video and everything else. I'd rather go find another seller. In fact, I did find another seller that we're listing at 700,000 on a 5% commission. And right now, 5% feels like a triumph.
You know what, you guys, I think the conversation is like, we are a fiduciary representative of our clients. Okay.
Yep.
And I think when we go in for listing appointments, we have a perfect opportunity to explain our value, right? But when we're with buyers, a lot of times we're like, let's just get you pre-approved and head out the door, right? And yet you guys are also a representative. And
I'm just finishing up a Zoom.
is somebody on, we got to mute somebody here.
Yeah, you got to mute somebody.
Okay.
Let me just try. There's one person, everybody else. Okay. When you guys are starting to work with a buyer, letting them know, like, here's my value in your situation. Most buyers in this market have to have representation, want to have representation. They want somebody to fight for them, negotiate for them, advocate for them, talk about your wins, talk about how you're going to be relentlessly working for them. And you guys work on contingency. Nobody here gets a paycheck every 2 weeks. We get a paycheck when we do our job at a very high level and get it done. And it's a very skill-based, hardworking market, in my opinion. It's probably one of the hardest working markets I've seen agents work in. At the end of the day, we all deserve to get paid, whatever that looks like. So don't be afraid to explain to somebody, hey, look, I do work on contingency. This is what I do for a living. And this is how it's probably going to play out. But in the event we're looking at a commission that is this particular way and you want to pursue the house, this is how we can work to structure the deal. And that is up to you guys. You guys are 100% independent contractors can make that decision. But I just want to make sure we have that dialogue, because I think we are starting to see it. I know our team's starting to have those conversations and starting to bring it up. And I don't want you guys to get caught off guard where you're working with a buyer writing 4 or 5 offers, and the one you write an offer on has $100 buyer agent commission, which I just saw recently, because co-op means $1 and above, by the way. Co-op doesn't mean, they have to guarantee a certain minimum.
Well, and Ann, I know we're running over on time, and you guys were trying to be really diligent about keeping this to an hour, but I just want to piggyback on something that you said, and this is maybe more for the newer agents. When you're working with buyers have been conditioned now by having access to so much information on Zillow and Redfin, to think that in many cases they're kind of doing the job of an agent already just because they can get all of these listings. I think it's important for us to educate them about all the other things that we do. It's not just about searching for homes. It's about, all the skills we bring to the table. We bring a whole team to the table
Yeah.
that will come into play as we work through a transaction. And I've often told buyers that I feel like our value increases the further we get into a transaction. It's not just about searching for homes. In fact, that's the easiest thing. I mean, not in a low inventory market, but you know what I mean. They have access to the same information that we do in many cases, sometimes within 8 minutes. So, I mean, I think we have to be better at saying, you know, look, this is a team effort. I tell people, you may find the house, I may find it. There's any number of different ways we may find the property, but I'm your advocate, and my value increases from the minute we start writing an offer all the way through to the end, and educate them about what that means, because otherwise they don't know. Or maybe they don't know.
It's funny. Well, so when I do a buyer consult in person, I use a buyer's wheel, and I always kind of split it in two because it's designed that way beautifully. But I always joke that the first half of the wheel is kind of the fun part. You know, we're looking for homes, all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, as soon as we get an offer accepted, I'm like, this is when I come into play. Yeah. This is when I become very important in the transaction, in, you know, managing and making sure that you, like, my job is to operate in your best interest. I say that to every client, and to let them know that this isn't about what is going to work best for me. It's about what works best for them. And then I'm bound to them by signing a buyer broker and working with them to operate in their best interest. And so, you know, they do need to understand that there is a benefit to, and I've worked with a lot of people who have said, you know, my last buyer's agent didn't work very well for me. And that's sad to see. And so it's, you know, explaining that there is a value and what you bring to the table.
Mm-hmm. And you guys, it's the same thing on the listing side, because a lot of agents are, you know, a lot of assumptions are anybody can sell a house right now. It's like, well, how do you differentiate? Like, on both sides of the table, buying agent or selling agent, you have to be able to show your value. And I think that's just what we're talking about, is how do we bring that value and benefit to the table at the time you're starting to meet with people, so that you do get paid in a way that makes sense for you, or that you're representing your clients. And again, we're going through a really challenging market. You know, it's like, and that's just real estate. There's always a challenge in real estate, but it's also an opportunity for all of us. And I think it's an opportunity for all of us to raise our level of professionalism and do right by our clients. And, you know, obviously we have some, you know, two fantastic buyers agents here that have brought a lot of value this morning. And oh, there's a question. Are you all having buyers sign exclusivity agreements now that buyers require so much more legwork? That's a great question. And by the way, we're over time, so if anybody has to leave, that's fine. We're going to stay and just finish the conversation, because I think it's of value.
Personally, go ahead, Erica. Please.
I was just going to say, yeah, we generally try to, on the team, have buyers sign, you know, and it's more letting them understand that, you know, they're going to have other buyers agents trying to come after them. But like, if you want my time, my weekends, my evenings, you know, at your beck and call, basically, that I require you understand that we're working together, because I'm not seeing anything until they're happy. And it's just making them aware that there is a relationship there.
Personally, I don't, and that just comes from the school of thought of the people that I learned from, you know, Mark, and before him, Steve Kerr. I don't think he does either. But I think it's, you know, going back to one thing Erica said when she was talking about like pointing out issues in the house and that type of thing, like, if you can show value immediately when you're showing people property before you're even in contract, you know, back to what you said, Will, if you can kind of point out problems before they happen and have some kind of insight into, you know, condition, but also, you know, on the sell side, telling stories. Like, I had a seller wait for more offers recently because I thought the first buyer was going to back out that had a smoking offer in the fall, and they did. So I predicted that. And so you just tell people stories about different things you've done, and I think that builds trust too.
I also think I don't use a buyer broker agreement, which is what Zeta is referring to. I've never had good success with that, but when I do work with buyers, I talk to them candidly about the relationship in the same way that we would go out and list a home and sign all the paperwork that's associated with that. I'll point out to them that I don't choose to ask them to sign any kind of paperwork, a buyer broker agreement. However, there is a relationship there that I want them to understand, that we're still working for them on their behalf and as their fiduciaries. And, you know, that can really help, because, you know, I'm sure we've all had it happen when somebody calls you, I never believe what happened. we went into an open house, we found a house and we're under contract. You're like, what? Yeah, so I mean, that I think if we have those hard conversations, they don't have to be hard, I suppose, but we have to be honest and say, look, like you're hiring me, even though I'm choosing not to ask you to sign something, you are hiring me to do a job for you. And this is like Erica said, if I'm going to give up my weekends and my free time and I'm going to use all my skills and my deep bench of talent that we can draw into this process for any number of reasons, they have to understand that they've hired you, even if it's kind of in air quotes, they've hired you to do that job.
I think the one thing too that we've seen a lot of, I mean, and do we do a buyer agreement every buyer? No, but a lot of them or ones that we feel like we're competing in the beginning with. But we've also experienced too, where buyers get so desperate for inventory. Anybody experienced this where they get so desperate for inventory? You're showing them everything. The buyer fatigue sets in. They've maybe lost some offers. They're really, really trying to find that house. And all of a sudden they're like going to places they never would have thought, but in the beginning, like we had a buyer last year that just got so loosey-goosey on us. We ended up writing an offer with another agent on a weekend. And they were just like, well, it was just, we got wrapped up in the situation. We called on this Craigslist ad and then we went out and saw it and the agent said he could write it up for us. And, luckily it didn't work out. We ended up, selling them something, but twice they got into situations where they just thought it was normal. Like, well, if we can find the house and somebody can secure it for us. And even though you tell them like, we are your person, I think sometimes there's those buyers that, whether they are innocent in their thought process or whether they're intentional, they're going to serve themselves sometimes first before they care about the agent that's put in a ton of hours. We're sort of, after a while, they just, they're just all about that one goal, whether or not, you've helped them. So just be careful with that. Again, we don't, everyone gets to do the business the way they want to do it. But sometimes if you feel like you need to like really explain, like, this is just like a listing agreement, we're going to work together. And if you don't like me and you're not happy after a while, or it's not a match, we can always, throw in the towel. But this is also maybe a loyalty agreement is kind of how we explain it. And we're going to lock arms and move forward. And this is how, and it's a great opportunity too, you guys, if you do find that, you start to see buyer agent commissions in the areas you're working start to get tighter. It's a great opportunity to talk about that up front, because there's a section, the buyer agent agreement, that explains how do you get paid, what's your minimum. And that's just an opportunity once again to say, hey, this is what's going on in the real estate market as it's tightening. You're going to see tightening in inventory. We see tightening in our fees. And yet, hopefully you agree that, the value that we're going to bring to the table is worthy of getting paid. Most people aren't going to argue that you deserve to get paid, right? Like everyone out here doesn't work for free. So it's just having that open, honest dialogue. And they appreciate that. I find it brings a trust level up front that you'd never find when you can say, hey, here's how real estate commissions work. Then they're like, yeah, explain it to us. We have no idea. We don't make it a mystery. Just whip that out there and say, this is how we get paid. And I want to make sure we're on the same page with this. And this is how the market's been and what it's doing and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, cool. We know how we're all operating and it's transparent. It feels good versus kind of like, uh-oh, we just hit a, $500 BAC. What do I do now?
Well, and yeah, people have said for years, buyers are liars. I'm sure we've all heard that. I've never felt that way. I've often felt like it's not necessarily true that they're liars. We often haven't educated them well enough to understand the process. And I think when we do that, like we're talking about right now up front well enough, it mitigates those situations almost entirely.
I've also seen where a lot more buyers and buyers agents are firing each other. I've never seen so much of this where like we'll get a phone call from a buyer and they're like, hey, we want to talk to you guys about buying something. But they say, oh, well, we've written, 15 offers with this other broker. And right away I'm thinking, okay, and then vice versa, or they're like not finding the inventories hitting the market and they start to think it's the realtor they're working with. Like they're not working hard enough. They're not finding that inventory. That's really prevalent. And vice versa. There's sometimes we fired a lot of, I hate to use the word fired, but just like let them go back into the marketplace to, be absorbed by somebody else, because sometimes like the amount of struggle and lack of emotional ability to like really pull it all together is just part of like, and we get it, this is if you're a first-time home buyer and you're getting thrown into this wild market, sometimes it's hard for your brain to get wrapped around what's happening and understand what you got to do, or you simply just can't do it. So I think it's just like the buyer consultations have never been more important. The ability to communicate how this whole thing is working, even on your side of things, also theirs, just, kind of helps set that expectation a little bit upfront more than maybe just as you're going through the process and trying to hurry up and figure it out as you go. And then they're like, okay, well, why didn't you tell me that before or something? But anyway, hopefully this was helpful for you guys. Erica and Chris, thank you so much. You guys were awesome. You're obviously very successful. It's always good to hear all different ways people are doing things. Does anybody have any other questions that they want to ask Erica or Chris before we all leave?
Yeah, I want to second that. This is just, it's golden information. Chris and Erica, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you guys are busy. And for all of you on here, especially the newer agents, this is the kind of working intelligence from the trenches that I think is so invaluable. You just don't get this in the typical real estate class.
I just want to say thank you, Ann and Will and everybody, Erica and Chris. It's huge to be sharing secrets and help everybody, and no matter what level you're at. And these meetings are fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, we're just doing this because we want to. We hope that this brings value to all of you and helps us all be better out there in the field. So thanks, everybody. We ran way over today. But
I know we did.
We're trying so hard to be diligent about that 1 hour time frame, but we hope that this is really valuable to you guys. It's
Too much good information.
Market out there. Okay, good.
That's why it goes over. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
All right. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great
Send
Monday.
to the recording.
Good day, guys.
All right. Thanks again, Chris and Erica. Bye.
Yes, thank you guys.
All right. Bye.